The beginning of this week's Torah portion is both beautiful and painful at the same time. It's beautiful because it includes the iconic scene of when God tells Moshe, that although he can't enter the promised land, he can gaze at it. So Moshe climbs up to a scenic vantage point and he stares, he gazes at the entire expanse of the land of Israel in every direction with that burning, yearning desire to enter. He can't, but he wants to so badly. And when he does that, he sears that desire into the consciousness of every later Jew so that every one of us will want to live in Israel, or at least visit, or tune in when it's in the news, or support, or at least have some connection to the land, to our land. But it's also painful because that scene occurs right on the heels of Moshe's unsuccessful request to try to convince God to let him enter the land. The rabbis explain that Moshe prayed 515 heartfelt prayers before God finally said to him, "Enough, not another word on the topic," and he stopped praying. The rabbis further tell us that had he prayed one more prayer, God would have had to relent and let him into the promised land. It shows us the incredible power of prayer. A human being's heartfelt request can at times force God to change his mind. And it also shows us Moshe and what was perhaps the finest moment in his life. If it were me, it might have been different. If, God forbid, an angel would ever tap me on the shoulder on the eve of Yom Kippur and say, "Dude, don't bother fasting or praying. I looked in the book. You're not going to make it through this year." I wouldn't listen to that. I'd redouble my efforts. I'd pray with intensity like never before. But Moshe must have known that he was on the verge of convincing God, and yet he listened and he stopped, even though he had a precedent to go on. Previously, after the sin of the golden calf, God told him, "Leave me alone. I'm going to destroy the Jewish people." Moshe didn't leave God alone. He prayed and he saved us. And so he could have run through the stop sign again this time. He could have said, "God, I'm begging you, tear down that wall. Let me into the promised land." But he didn't. The difference was that the first time around after the golden calf, when God said, "Leave me alone," Moshe wasn't talking or praying at the time. He realized, one second, God's hinting to me that he wants me to pray to save the Jewish people. But this time, in contrast, Moshe was praying. So when God said, "Stop, not another word," Moshe knew that God meant it. And so as he always did, he sets the right example for us. As difficult as it is, when God says something, you've got to listen. But there's still one more question. Why did God wait for Moshe to pray 515 prayers? If he knew he wasn't going to let Moshe into the promised land, why not cut him off after one prayer, or 10, or 50? 515 sounds cruel. But maybe God wanted Moshe to keep praying to create a reservoir of prayer, a reservoir of tears up in heaven that later Jews could access. And who knows, maybe it's that pool of tears that Jews throughout the millennia have tapped into. Back at the time of Ezra the scribe, when he brought the Jews back after the first exile to rebuild the temple. Back in 1948, when we retook title to our ancestral land. More recently, when Jews from Yemen and Ethiopia and Russia were able to fulfill their dream and get out of those countries and make it to the promised land. And every year, when individual Jews and families or groups decide to move to Israel and make it their home. So don't ever get frustrated if you pray and your prayers aren't answered immediately or aren't answered at all. You have no idea what effect those prayers may have someday up in heaven or down here on earth.